A few weeks ago, there was a very famous stabbing on a subway. In this young woman was bleeding out. It was a very tragic stabbing, and there was all these people sitting around her
Yeah.
on the subway. And at first, nobody helped her. And so for like a minute, they just kind of
Yeah.
sit, seeing that she's dying, and don't do anything to help. And then eventually, somebody comes over to help her and does first aid. And I was realizing, oh, this is a problem with society overall. That's actually something that authors can help with. And so there's two pieces of this problem, both of which I think authors can help with in their fiction specifically. So the first is this concept of the bystander effect,
Yeah.
where when something bad happens, we assume somebody else is going to do something about it. So there's a famous incident in the 1960s where there's this terrible crime taking place that I won't describe, uh, that for YouTube reasons, and um, like 60 people or dozens of people watch in New York City the crime happening, and nobody calls the police for like 20 minutes because they all assume somebody else is going to call the police. And um, you can help fight this by working in characters into your books that have the worldview that I always help. This is something that was drilled into our heads in Boy Scouts, right? Do a good turn daily. If there is a car accident, you always stop and try to render aid unless there's an ambulance there already. And that kind of worldview needs to be more common, more of a guardian
Right.
worldview. And the other problem that happens is that people don't know how to help, or what they know is wrong. And this is where authors are actually a part of the problem. So there's some common first aid myths that get perpetuated through movies and TV and through books. And so we're going to debunk some of these myths. But first, I want to kind of go into some really basic first aid rules of thumb. So, in terms of uh, order of importance, you have if somebody's heart is not beating, that's the most important thing. The next most important thing is that they're breathing. The next most important thing is that the blood stays inside of them, although that could be the most important thing depending on how fast it's leaving. And then the last most important thing is broken bones. You'll notice bullets are nowhere on this list. So I'm gonna skip
Always
ahead.
take the bullet out first.
So there is this Hollywood myth that's in a lot of books too, where someone is shot and there's this like intense hurry to pull the bullet out of the injured person.
Why?
And so
It's plugging the hole.
I I just want to say, if you believe this myth, and I don't blame you if you do, because it is like every single TV show seems to have this. There are Vietnam veterans who were shot by the Viet Cong that still have the bullets in them to this very day, and they are still alive and healthy. Sometimes it's not worth it to remove the bullet, even in a surgical suite. And it's never worth it to remove the bullet in a first aid situation because the bullet is
It's
not the
so
problem.
dirty and so not sanitary.
And
You're gonna go
for
so septic so fast.
also, if you're like, oh, I write epic fantasy, this isn't going to affect me. Okay, so the same is even more true with arrows. So I want you to imagine a
Yes.
Ziploc bag full of water. You seal the Ziploc bag with water. Now you take a pencil and you stab the Ziploc bag full of water. What is leaking out of the Ziploc bag? Nothing, because the pencil is blocking the hole. Now, I want you to remove the pencil. What is going to now happen to the Ziploc bag? Bloop, 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 bloop. Right?
No,
Like
no, no.
all the
Even
water
better,
is going
even
to
better.
bloop out.
There's a part of the pencil that's wider that and you take it and you rip it.
So please take these. There's other ways of adding urgency to a scene other than perpetuating first aid myths, because real people learn their first aid from the fiction they consume,
Yes.
and then it causes them to render bad first aid or not render first aid at all. So, um, I want your heroes next time someone's shot with an arrow to just break off the arrow and leave it in. And I'll say, Hollywood's actually better at the arrow first aid than it is at the
Yes.
bullet first
They
aid.
are changing that around because people are like, "No."
For some reason, a giant arrow sticking out of you is fine, but a teeny tiny little bullet somewhere inside of the body, we gotta clear the table and rush them onto the thing. So, anyway, leave it in. One of the treatments that they would have, from my understanding, is to cauterize the wound. So, like a battlefield, sometimes they would have um, like hot irons behind
Mhm.
the battle lines for rapid
Just for
cauterization.
this.
And where it's most important is, um, well, this is going to be gross. We're totally going to get demonetized, but this is for first aid purposes.
Yay.
Limbs. So you have
Yeah.
major veins and arteries going in and out of a
Yes.
limb, and getting a limb cut off is often fatal because of the bleeding. So yes, someone can live very happily for decades without an arm, but if their arm is cut off and it's not treated correctly, they will lose it. So the first thing you want to do if someone gets an arm cut off in a battlefield situation is put a tourniquet on it. But another thing you want to do is cauterize those blood vessels. And I actually have a little bit of experience with this because in my younger days, I would work a little bit on my grandparents' ranch. And my grandmother did not like her cows to have horns because she was afraid someone was going to get gored. Now, I didn't know this, but horns have veins and arteries going inside of them. So they're not just a bone, they actually have a blood supply. And when you cut off the horn of a cow, you can see little squirts of blood squirting out of the horn of the cow. So, how do you fix it? You cauterize the horn, which is a smell that I can't remember, and I'm thankful for that. But I remember it being a smell at the time. If I ever smell it again, it would probably come back to me. So, um, that's not what you want to do. So part of this is just good, like understanding to have better fiction.
Mhm.
You would never cauterize a wound. I'm not recommending that because we live in a world where we can first 911 to get somebody to come and deal with that sort of thing. But a tourniquet in a first aid situation is almost always the right call. I had a cousin who was a cop who used to be a Marine, and he used his tourniquet all the time. He used it when he was in the Marines, and he used it as a cop all the time because you can stop bleeding so effectively with a tourniquet. And in a modern situation, you're never going to lose a limb because you're only trying to stop the bleeding for a few minutes until the professionals show up. All
It's
right,
yes.
go ahead.
So there's
I'm ranting here a little bit, but
it's okay. No, it's great. So I learned world history by playing Age of Empires. Okay. Now I went to school, I was homeschooled. I had tons of things that taught me about world history, and I remembered everything from playing Age of Empires and Age of Empires 2. The fiction taught me about it. Okay. And when it came up, I always accessed those files in my brain because I spent way more engaged time with them. When you put it in your book, you are helping to train people in how to do proper first aid because when people are in a panic situation or they're under the influence of adrenaline, they're going to default back to what they knew or where they've seen someone else do it before, which is why a lot of people are doing TV first aid. Or, if they read lots of books, they're doing novel first aid. I saw this happen in boot camp. Okay. We do, and somebody asked this earlier. Yes, we do have a lifesaver course in boot camp. And it was hysterical because you'd have Marines come in and then to simulate a combat environment with the adrenaline, you'd have 4 drill instructors screaming around your head. You had to analyze the mannequin, find the injury on the mannequin, and then treat the injury on the mannequin using the steps you had been trained in for a week. Well, you have 4 guys screaming at you, and this simulates gunfire and explosions and all kinds of stuff just going on around you. And it's like, I'm going to die because these guys are going to kill me right here. Well, I got to watch one guy come in. I was the scribe and I was grading recording the grades that the drill instructors were giving. This kid came in. Now, the mannequins didn't have heads. Okay. They 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 were the kind of training gear that just didn't have heads, okay? This kid ran in. He's getting screamed at by all 4 drill instructors. He drops down to his knees and immediately ties a tourniquet around the neck of the headless mannequin. All 4 drill instructors stopped. Like, it was silent for like a second. And then they started screaming at him, "Save a life! Save his life! Do it now!" That kid got to go again.
All right. So a few more first aid. I remember in Boy Scouts we had a female dummy for our CPR training, and that was high drama for 12-year-olds. That's all I'll say. So
Saber.
if someone has been stabbed, what is the most important thing that you do right away? You put pressure on the wound, preferably with some kind of cloth to keep constant, steady pressure, and then a tourniquet depending on where the stab is. If there's trauma, so somebody's in a car crash or there's an airplane crash,
Or somebody said a
they
bad
don't
word to them.
get out of an airplane crash and start shooting their gun and being an action star. They because there's such a thing as shock, and if somebody is in shock, their judgment falls. And I will say some books get this really good. In fact, there's a genre of book, noir books, and even the Dresden Files books gets this really good. So in the early Dresden Files, Harry Dresden gets injured, and those injuries have a high level of verisimilitude, as somebody put it, very accurate. And at one point, it's first person narration, and he gets clubbed over the back of the head. And for the next 6 hours of the in story world narration, he becomes super unreliable of a narrator, and his judgment gets really bad. And suddenly, as the reader, you are experiencing the concussion along with the protagonist, and that is really good writing. Now, at no point did he get good first aid treatment. In fact, people kept trying. He's like, "You look awful. You need to go to a doctor." He's like, "No, I don't need to go to a doctor."
I need to keep going.
So I'm not saying that you have to have like a character who's like, "Okay, now it's time to do the CPR, do so many compressions." You don't have to do that. You just have to accurately portray reality, and portraying this concussion and portraying kind of the trauma and even the shock a little bit, that sense of calm that comes on you. Because this is one of the really tragic things, the stabbing in this train that was caught on film. She gets stabbed and she doesn't realize how bad it is. So so at first she starts bleeding and she's kind of bewildered. The shock sets in almost immediately. And then she realizes how much she's bleeding. She puts her hands in her face and just cries and dies alone. It's so tragic.
Yeah.
It's why it's been so viral on Twitter. And what she's experiencing is trauma in addition to the stabbing.
Yeah.
All right, so let me hit a few more myths real quick. One really common myth is that CPR works right away, and it works almost every time. So in TV and movies, CPR has a really high success rate, and they only have to do a handful of compressions. And I'll give them a pass. For movies and TV, I'll give them a pass, especially if there's a real
Because they don't have
person.
20 minutes to give this.
Right. They don't have 20 minutes to give it. And if there's an actual actor who's getting compressions on them,
they don't want broken ribs.
Right. And so often they'll do it with improper technique for safety, because real CPR breaks ribs. In fact, I remember in Boy Scouts, I got dinged on one of my board of reviews for this, because one of the people on the board of the review had watched too many movies and thought I was wrong, when in reality I was right. And I came back for the return board review and didn't have that guy on. I got passed for my first class merit badge, or my first class rank. Not that I'm still bitter about it 30 years later.
Yeah, you sound fine.
I'm fine. I'm totally fine. Another one is oil on burns, and this one is the problem with this myth is that it's actually good advice, but it's applied inappropriately. So the most important thing to do when someone is recently burned is to cool the burn. And oil traps heat inside. Like swimmers in the Olympics who used to free swim through really cold water would cover themselves with oil to help retain their body heat in the water, and maybe to help them swim faster. Maybe it was all psychological.
Better photo op after too.
So you don't want to put the oil on the burn right away, but a burn from like previous days, potentially treating it with oil might make sense. But you want to just put a cool compress immediately on a burn. Another really big one, this is really common in Westerns, is sucking out snakebite venom. I've seen so many YouTube videos debunking this. There's basically no way, even with like an industrial strength vacuum, to get snakebite venom out in any sort of realistic way. I know you want to have the romantic interest, saving the damsel in distress who's been bit by a snake, and it's this romantic. Don't do it. It doesn't work. In fact, it's often just makes the situation worse. So
It
what
would
you want
make
to
a
do?
it would
Go ahead.
make a great scene though if you had a guy do this and everyone afterwards like, "What are you doing?"
There you go. Yeah. So what you really do is you lower the effective limb so that the venom doesn't pass through
Yeah.
the body as quickly, and you do everything you can to calm down that person so their heart rate will drop, so the venom doesn't spread as quickly. And you can actually build up a resistance to venom. So every time you get bit by a snake or stung by a bee, your body has more of a resistance to that until in some parts of the world there's a famous incident where King Mithridates basically invented anti-venom by observing people in North Africa, I think Carthage, uh, like get bit by these vipers and it have no effect. And so he started studying microdosing of poisons. He's known as the Poison King. He's the first guy to have an immunity to iocane powder by taking small amounts of it. Iocane powder is actually real. It's called anthrax, the king of poison and the poison of kings. And we are so getting demonetized on this episode. So, final one is tilting a head back for a nosebleed. You'll sometimes see this. I actually have personal experience with this. So I had a surgery, and in the recovery, the surgery went wrong, and my nose bled for like an hour, and really bad. And I ended up in the emergency room because the blood was so much it started coming out of my eyes.
Jeez.
But you have to lean forward. If you lean back, if you lean your head back with a nosebleed, the blood goes in your lungs, and now you're coughing up blood. You don't want that. It doesn't help. What do you do for nosebleed? The same thing you do for any bleeding: pressure.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say suck the blood out of the nose.
Here's the thing. I'm actually personally very squeamish on a lot of this medical stuff. My wife loves reading nurse blogs and she has like a really high tolerance. But I did get first aid training at various times in various places, and I personally get very triggered. And I think we can do better. And I've actually had the idea while we're talking about creating an AI tool that will fact check first aid stuff. I'm not sure if I can build it, but kind of like the historical fact checker that I built, I
Mhm.
may build one for medical events. And so you may hear if I have enough trauma in my life, we may have a medical fact checker. uh,
Seriously, there is a lot of stuff that you can do. One of the best things you can do is just establish a safe perimeter so that people who don't know what they're doing. We had a drive-by shooting close to my house probably like a year and a half ago or something, and they burned the car in this alleyway where we drop our trash and they come and get the trash. And so I'm already moving. I heard the gunshots. I was already moving. I was already heading to it. I heard the tires squealing. I knew they were gone. I knew there was no combat situation. So I show up and I see the burning car. I'm like, okay, they ditched their vehicle and they switched to a getaway vehicle, so they're on their way out. I had this dumb civilian, first of all, pull the car in front of the trash alleyway. So now emergency personnel cannot reach the burning vehicle if somebody was in trouble. I yell at him, sergeant style, order him to get out of the way of emergency vehicles. And then he got out of the car and started running towards the burning vehicle. I'm like, what are you doing? I'm like watching suicide happen in slow motion. So I hit him and I moved him out of the way. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, somebody get me in there. I'm like, dude, they would be long dead by now. Do you hear any screaming? No. What I'm worried about is a fuel tank going off. Like, stay back.
although fuel tanks don't explode in real life the way they do in the movies.
They
Um,
can still rupture and spray all over you.
It's true. It's true. In fact, the fear of fuel tanks exploding. I was in a really bad car crash with an 18-wheeler on I-35, and I was unconscious. I'm dangling from an upside down car, and these folks get me out of the car. They help me out of the car. They're really nice. I'm kind of like fading in and out of consciousness. And I'm right next to the car and I'm in a lot of pain. And I am remembering my Boy Scout training that in a situation like this, you don't want to move somebody too much just in case
Right.
there's a
Right.
spinal injury.
Yeah.
Moving them actually could sever the spinal cord. That's why you'll often see EMS will like put little things around people's heads and necks, because as long as the spinal cord isn't severed, the bones will heal just fine, but the spinal cord won't. And so you can lose the use of your legs or whatever. And they notice that the car is leaking gasoline, and they get concerned that the car could catch on fire because it's leaking gasoline. So they start dragging me all over this field, and I'm like in and out of consciousness. I'm trying to articulate, "Don't do it! Don't drag me!" Fortunately, my back was fine, and I had a miraculous recovery. Uh, but they were very well-meaning, and this is what we're kind of getting to. There's a lot of people who are well-meaning, but they don't know what to do in these sorts of
Yeah.
situations, and I suspect that if you have violence in your book and you get first aid training, that as a professional author in the eyes of the IRS, that first aid training would probably
Oh, it's
be
tax
tax
deductible.
deductible. Yep.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it's in part of me wants to host a writer's retreat sometime and do these sorts of things, like bring in subject matter experts to
Yeah, yeah, that would be fun.
teach gun safety and gun shooting and
Oh my
accuracy, but
gosh.
also like first aid and stuff like that.
Also, you have different cultures of violence, right? So there's this really fun story that happened in Washington D.C. when the Marines were there, and they were supporting local police as they were trying to get things under control or whatever. And this DC cop, there was a domestic disturbance. There was gunfire coming out of the house. So this cop moved up and yelled to the Marines behind him, "Cover me." This means something very different to police people. Okay. Cover me means, hey, watch out, watch my back. I'm moving up to the door. For Marines, cover me is I'm moving up. You need to put everything's heads down. And so the
Which
Marines dumped all of their mags into the house, blew out the front of the house. The windows were gone. They just raked the whole thing. And the cop is like, well, the domestic disturbance ended. The guy came out with his hands up and everything was fine. But you have to understand there's different cultures of responding to these kinds of situations. If you're in a combat situation and a Marine gets hit, the Marines don't go to help him. That's the doc's job. Okay. Or it's the sergeant's job if the doc isn't there. What the Marines do is increase the rate of fire because now the doc is moving and the doc has to be protected above all else because he's saving Marine lives. All right. So we are dumping fire in all directions everywhere. They actually said, I read an intel thing one time, is like, don't wing a Marine. Because if you hit one and he doesn't die, things get worse.
the last thing you want is to make a Marine even angrier, because he started off angry and now he's super angry.
Well, he started off professional. He was reacting according to his training. Now you done made it personal.
And this is actually a really important distinction in why we have this concept in American law where we don't use the American military for any kind of police action
Yes.
inside of the United States. So we have a whole special branch of the military that is trained for police actions. It's called the National Guard.
Mhm.
And you'll notice Marines never operate inside the United States because their worldview of, if it moves, shoot it until it stops shooting, and until it stops moving,
Mhm.
is very good when you're over there killing the bad guys. And we got to do something about those Nazis in Germany. It's really bad in a situation where, let's say you're dealing with a riot, and these
Yeah.
rioters could become law-abiding, tax-paying citizens tomorrow if the situation can be handled appropriately. And it's why the National Guard gets special training, and why the National Guard comes from often the neighborhoods
Mhm.
that they're protecting. Like, I remember during the Black Lives Matter protests, there was a famous incident where somebody's yelling at one of the National Guard's people, like, you're an invader or whatever. Like, what are you talking about? I'm from 4th Street. He's like from 6
I'm
blocks
from right
away.
down the road, man.
Yeah. Like, I'm your neighbor. These are, and it's a very different mindset. And police are even more that way. So police actually can't use violence unless they can trigger the same self-defense law that you trigger, so at least in Texas. So I was on the grand jury in Texas, and I was on the grand jury for an officer involved shootings. We got briefed by a assistant district attorney on the laws governing this. And for a police officer to use deadly force, they have to feel in threat of their life or the life of somebody around them.
Yes.
And so which is not the case for a Marine. In uniform on a battlefield, seeing somebody else in uniform on a battlefield, the Marine does not need to fear death in order to take lethal action. It's a completely different worldview. And we have rambled way off of our first aid.
That's what we call an opportunity.